Good morning. I think our job is cut out. I listened to Minister Motsoaledi when he was talking yesterday. He made the point that buying local and protecting local products seems to be an international norm. This morning when Jeremy Bena was talking, he also made reference to the fact that most of the hotel facilities are consuming a lot of locally produced services and goods. And your artifacts that you're giving to your tourists, although they could be sourced anywhere in the rest of Africa as Tebe will have it, but actually it is about localizing it. We are also aware of the fact that this is a very emotive conversation because if it doesn't come easily, it is then forced by policy and other things like that. So I thought in introducing the panel here, which consists of, to my left, Eustace Mashimbye, who is the proudly SA Chief Executive Officer, and Brett Hoppe, the General Manager for Sun City and Procurement, and I think local procurement specifically, we'll talk about that. Now, the issue really, when you start this conversation, is about understanding certain nuances about it. The first one is people have a belief that it's a political rhetoric. It's not really about economic imperatives. People are doing it because they want political score points. And there's also a belief that when you're talking about buying local, you are going to create enemies with workers from other countries because they start saying you don't want to receive our products. But it's also a bit of a challenge where you have trading partners, countries that is, that are trading together. How do you embrace their products in your country when you're already on this campaign of saying, no, we buy local? The interesting thing for me is to observe how buying local is enforced in different countries. It is not a fashionable thing, but it is something that is done. I look at America as a very good example. Buy America and Travel America. Donald Trump implemented an executive order which was very specific. Buy America, hire America. We also see presidents that will wear locally produced goods, go on TV and then make a statement that we will continue to buy locally. But there seems to be a problem that we don't easily embrace this notion. 2/3 of Americans, by the way, will pay a little bit more to buy American products. For them, it is based on about 3 key things. Firstly, is their intrinsic belief that American products have got better quality than foreign products. Whether it's true or not, it's up to you to judge. And the second thing is that they know it supports American industries. There are certain industries that are geared to supply internally in America. So that is important. The common one for all of us is that it creates jobs and contribute to the GDPs of countries. I don't have all the answers. That's the reason why I've got this panel here. Let me start with you, Eustace. I'll give you an opportunity to present your opening remarks on this. Your membership of Proudly South Africa, that emblem that you have there, that we all proudly display, has a requirement that before you can get this badge of honor, you must have met a certain minimum a requirement, which is about the local content that you are able to produce to support out there. But you are also about really pushing buying local. Let's hear a little bit more from you in your presentation. I'll have more questions. Brett, I'll come to you because you're sitting in a very interesting position here. But I'll come back to you. Let's start with you, Eustace.
Should I do the slides or talk?
Yes, if you do have a slides, that will make your job easier.
Yeah, it will make my job easier to do that quick intro. I know we don't have time, but I asked for slides because some of those answers sit in some of the slides, and I'll be quick because I know I'm standing between you and your breakfast. I don't, oh yes, that's what I'm looking for. Perfect.
Sorry.
You and your tea time, so I'll be quick. I mean, I think this has been spoken about a lot, so I won't necessarily talk about the unemployment rate in the country. But I want to show you a quick example of why it's important, as those of you sitting in the entire tourism value chain, to buy local. So there's an industry, furniture. We all buy furniture, all types of furniture for our establishments and for our businesses. Look at what imports have done to the furniture industry. An industry that used to have 3,500 factories making furniture items in the country, reduced to 1,100 factories just within a 20-year period. In terms of direct jobs that were created by that industry, used to have 50,000 direct jobs. You're only sitting with 25,000 direct jobs. So half of those jobs have been lost because we are buying imported furniture, all of us, irrespective of whatever sector you come from. And it's not just the direct jobs that are impacted on. Every time you buy a furniture item that comes from South Africa, you're supporting other industries that are part of that value chain. Because to make a furniture item, you need raw materials and components, and they come from all of these industries. And so every time jobs are lost because a furniture factory closes down because we have not bought from them, indirect jobs are lost in the chemicals industry that supplies paints and adhesives. The plastics industry, which supplies synthetic fibers, loses jobs. Agricultural industry loses jobs. The clothing and textiles and leather industry loses jobs simply because we are choosing to buy that which comes from outside. Mr. Nzima, who is the facilitator, spoke about this. It's a global phenomenon. So interestingly, our thinking was aligned because it's not just South Africa that is a buy local campaign. It happens all over the world. If you look at developed economies, they have buy local campaigns. Some of the examples that I've given today is Australia, the US, the UK. And in fact, you touched on the United States, which has that act. So you're right, that act in fact dates back to 1933. So it has always been part of the macroeconomic policy framework. And even the current President Biden, who followed Trump that you mentioned, within the first week of coming into office already signed into law the same executive orders that Trump signed into law when he was president. So despite the fact that they sit on opposite ends, they all believe in the one thing, that buying local will help create jobs for Americans. And so our mandate is simple. If anyone is making a purchasing decision in the country, whether they're in the public sector, the private sector, the ordinary consumers, as Proudly South African, we need to ensure that they buy local so that we can create jobs. And now I'm responding to the question that you asked. This is what it takes for any company that wants to affiliate with Proudly South African. This is what they need to comply with. There's 4 key criteria, and the first one, I mean, it's instant. When you look at the Proudly South African logo, you can already see that it's made up of the colors of the flag of the Republic of South Africa, telling you instantly that the product is made in South Africa. Meaning that even in instances where the raw materials or components come from outside of South Africa, the value addition or conversion of those raw materials into the final product happens in South Africa, so as a result, jobs are created. The second thing that is important, and that is what the likes of bread look for, is quality. It's one thing to say people must buy local, but they need to have an assurance that the product will satisfy the need for which it is bought. And so quality is one of the things that we assess the products for, and it's both products and services. So every time you come across a company utilizing the logo, every time you come across any product carrying the logo, you know that one, the product is made in South Africa, it contributes to the creation of jobs, and secondly, that the quality is at the level required for the industry in which it is going to be served. The last 2 are softer issues, but important. Companies that affiliate with us have to comply with the labor legislation of the country and help us reduce the carbon footprint. I won't necessarily touch on this, but I want to talk about ways in which, as an industry, you can support Proudly South African. And this is my last slide that I want to quickly touch on. Is the fact that all of you come from one or another of these industries as part of the broader tourism industry. So whether you are running a hotel or a resort like Brett, you need to look at what you buy. And you can choose. I mean, it's furniture, it's beds, it's food and beverages, it's uniforms, it's bedding, it's your linen. It even goes as far as being the cars. The shuttle services, we are all being ferried around. Where are the cars coming from? There are jobs created in that industry, and all of us tend to benefit from those jobs. It goes to as far as saying, even when you look at an industry such as the poultry industry, which is under threat from imports, we can actually turn around the situation simply by focusing on what we buy as facilities. And as I conclude, my concluding remark in this aspect, facilitator, is the fact that there is a need for those who make purchasing decisions in this industry to choose locally made products, because one of the things that as a South African you are going to have to choose to cut when you're unemployed is travel. You can't travel when the basics are a problem. But once you are employed, because the factory you work for is supported by Sun City and all of these other players within this industry, means you have a job, you have an income, you are able to get past surviving. And once you have a little bit more, you start traveling. And so it's a virtuous cycle, and all of us tend to benefit from purchasing decisions made in favor of locally made products. Once I respond again, I just want to play a quick video. But for now, let me hand it back to you.
Yes, thank you very much for that. I think there are 2 points that you've made now, which I would like to make a follow-up on before we go to Brad. The first one is about quality. There's an argument that forcing people to buy local compromises quality. How do you defend that, and how do you sell that? The second thing is about policy enforcement. It must be a very painful thing for a country like South Africa, simply because we are divided economically and otherwise, that it has to take government to put a policy that says you must have, in their contracts, you must have a local content percentage of some sort. How easy is that to you, for you to say it's not about compromised quality? Number 2, it is not a painful exercise. It shouldn't be to embrace the local content requirement.
In our world, it's not about compromising quality, because the assurance that we give the users, the end users, is that the products go through a vetting process. Every single product that belongs to any company that affiliates with us goes through a vetting process, which seeks to tell the procurer, the purchasing decision maker, that despite the fact that this product is supplied by a small business, despite the fact that you are buying from a company that you've never bought from, you can trust that someone has vetted their quality, and we vet according to what best practice is for that industry, according to what is prescribed as the standard for that industry. And so we are confident in our case that every single product that carries the proudly South African logo goes through that test of quality, and that the end user can trust it.
Brett, Sun City is a very interesting case study for me. You are geographically, you are in the middle of nowhere, rural by definition, but from a trading point of view, you are an international brand, a complete destination on its own, very successful product. You must be facing a very interesting problem here, because firstly, you need an assurance that you will have a steady supply of your material as well as your employees, the quality as well as the skills requirements. How have you balanced all of these things? Do you have any success story that you want to brag about?
I think Dumalamba Khoetsu, and thank you. It's a sad day when we have to say it's a prescription that we're driving local. And through the course of today, I'll talk about local to the northwest as a micro of South Africa. So as we sit here right now, through the half year, we're sitting at approximately 38.6% of local spend. That equates to roughly 250 million rand. Now, in a province that's as impoverished as the northwest, one can only imagine the impact of 500 million rand flowing into the economy by year end. Okay, but I think the biggest part of this aspect, this doesn't happen by chance. Every single South African, every single corporate citizen has a responsibility to drive local procurement. It's an obligation. It's not even a negotiable. And I think, from a Sun City perspective, it's been very interesting. Post-COVID, and in a very perverse way, from a Sun City perspective, COVID gave us some opportunities. It gave us the opportunity to reflect on a 40-year-old business and understand the status of the business, the status of our supply chain, the status of our suppliers. And I think someone on the previous panel, and I'm sorry I can't recall who it was, but said, if you carry on doing it the same way, you're going to get the same result. And I mean, this property for me, it's my third return here, so it's an absolute passion. But more particularly, the livelihoods of the people that surround us, and we have a direct bearing on that. So, I've watched many corporate organizations, there's a tendency to apply rigorous procurement policies, which preclude SMME development, and these type of things. And those are the things that we need to address to say, not how can, or not how can't, but how can we enable that? And I think just to add on that aspect is there's a fundamental responsibility to guide emerging businesses through to quality, if there is a quality deficiency. Because very often, and I think the gene example that Tebe used earlier, is suddenly there's a perception that because it's local, the quality is substandard. Very, very, very often, more often than not, it's not the case. And if it is the case, we need to assist and support these businesses to rectify those issues and to become successful. The other very interesting part of procurement, and in particular here with our micro region of the Pilanesberg node, is that we are not operating in isolation. So again, post-COVID, we engaged with other sectors, the mining sector, agri-sector, and said, how can we come together to enable the supply chain? How can we come together to enable local procurement? And in so doing, increase our purchase power to the local communities. So, and I think for us, the more successful we can be in the marketing of South Africa, the more jobs we create. The more successful I can make Sun City, the more I'm able to bring that economic impetus to bear in the communities around us. And across the whole context of ESG, not only in local procurement, because there is a knock-on effect into many, many aspects.
Okay. When one looks at Sun City as an establishment, I would have thought that you guys would be tempted to have your own farm, your own piggery, your own poultry farm, because you are consuming so much of this. That's not the case, at least I believe so. But have you managed to establish suppliers that are coming from the villages and township that you want to talk about? When I was asking you to brag about your success stories, I want to hear those kind of things.
So,
the way you develop people and they actually hold them until they meet your full standards, and there's no excuse in between of saying, oh no, the standards are a little bit poor. I appreciate the procurement amount that you've spoken about, but have you created successful business people, farmers in this area?
And I think not only in farming, also in the aspects of services and service supply companies, supply companies from the local communities and able to deliver at a very high level. But if you look at that concept that you mentioned, we're looking at a cooperative concept presently where we provide smaller farmers a route to market. And we also provide them with an opportunity to upskill from a HACCP perspective in terms of getting their product to a market. If a small farmer who's out in Muruleng only produces X amount, he doesn't really have a route to market. So we're looking at the cooperative concept for that. The other one we're looking at presently, and I think this is an exciting project, is harnessing the power of the industry. So it's not only about Sun City and Sun International. There is a node around us of hospitality. We're looking at establishing a bakery in Makhwasi, and at the outset, all the hospitality establishments in the node will make a commitment to purchase from that bakery. Now, it's a hell of a story from an international perspective, because if we can say at breakfast in the palace, this croissant comes from a bakery in Makhwasi, it has created X number of jobs, this loaf of bread, or whatever the case may be. And again, with the experience that we have in our hospitality establishments with the various chefs, etc., it's easy to impart that IP. So I think it's about looking at the context of local a lot more broadly and applying one's mind and thinking to a large extent out of the box, not necessarily saying, we're insular as an industry.
Okay. I think this clock is running a little bit too fast. Eustace, what sort of resistance have you received from the industry when you are trying to promote the Buy Local campaign?
Look, the biggest resistance is that of those who refuse to pay the premium, where there is a premium that needs to be paid. Because in some instances, economies of scale say if it comes from China, it might be cheaper because of labor costs, as well as the fact that there's export subsidies in those countries, and add to that economies of scale because they produce in large quantities. And so what we have done to counter that is we have developed a program that speaks to access to market for our members. So as a member of PaliServe, you benefit from an array of access to market opportunities because that way we're aggregating demand. We go out, we look for localization commitments from the private sector, and because of the increased buying that happens from an array of industries, you then start achieving economies of scale in the country itself. And because you're competing on an equal footing with other local producers, as a result of that commitment that says when we all buy these type of products, we'll buy them locally, you are then able to start achieving that which helps local guys to compete and sell.
I see some frantic hands there saying time is up. There is no such thing as in closing and in conclusion. So we should be done now. But I wanted you to give some advice to TBCSA members on your experiences, how to best support buying local. Just one quick word, and we're out of here.
2 sentences, one quick word will be difficult. Look at what you buy on a day-to-day basis. Look at where the products are coming from. If the products are coming from outside of South Africa, you have created jobs in those countries. And those jobs that you should have created in this economy are the jobs of people who then will be able to support you as a business person offering tourism services in the country.
So again, I think the point is isolate the object. If you look at Nedbank Golf Challenge, for example, last year our local spend was up at 68.7%, and this year we're targeting to move it beyond the 80%. So it's about taking that transaction, isolating it, and look at every single component and say, where is this component originating from, and how are we going to localize that component?
With that, I would like to say thank you very much. You've done your bit. Appreciate it.
Thank you, gentlemen.